All right, so you guys probably can hear it that there are marauding children upstairs. I don't know how many children live upstairs, but it's not few. Anyway, that's fine. They're gonna be our ever-present companions for our lectures this semester and maybe for another semester in the future if COVID doesn't work out so well. Anyway, so let's see. Last time we were talking about the positive effects of polyandry or queen remating inside of social insect societies, that it produces genetic diversity within colonies when there are many paternal lines, i.e. many different fathers with which to produce different lineages of workers and daughter queens from the society. And so this enhances division of labor and decreases infection rate within the society and increases overwintering survival in at least a few taxa. So if you produce if you have a cultivated honeybee population with many, many different queens that are each mated many times to different males, this produces a really diverse genetic stock, both within a colony and at your cultivated group of colonies. And that decreases things like the severity of outbreak of varroa mites, like on the right-hand side here, that decrease colony productivity and can occasionally kill them. Having increased genetic diversity within a society and between societies, having a diverse set of queens that you use to create your cultivated population of honeybees reduces the risk of things like colony collapse syndrome and decreases the odds that all the colonies or all the workforce of any one colony will fall victim to the same sort of environmental stressor, be that a mite or pesticides or climate change or whatever, right? So you're basically trying to create a diverse portfolio from the standpoint of from the apiary, which is a facility that has many colonies of honeybees. To have genetic diversity within a colony, genetic diversity between colonies, because it decreases the odds that all of them are going to be susceptible to the same sorts of ailments in the future, and the future is uncertain. So you don't want to put all of your genetic bee eggs in one basket. Aha. Anyway, so if you don't have high levels of genetic diversity, then you're much more likely to have boom and bust dynamics inside the population. Years that have the optimal kind of environmental conditions can cause all of a single genotype to boom, explode, have a great year. But then there's a chance that just every so often their Achilles heel combination of environmental features will strike, and that will mean the demise of not just individual colonies, but perhaps all or most of your stock. And that turns out to be problematic if in fact you get all of your livelihood from maintaining these bees and transporting them around to different kinds of crops that need to be pollinated. So high relatedness, although it's great from a standpoint of like organisms enhancing their indirect fitness benefits, surrounding yourself with relatives and helping out your relatives and making a neighborhood of very high levels of relatedness, maybe even inbred relatedness of above zero point 0.5, is advantageous from an inclusive fitness standpoint because you're getting all these indirect genetic kickbacks every time that you assist these individuals around you. Great. The problem is that has a short-term gain, but in a few generations or a few hundred generations or 1,000 generations, the circumstances surrounding your society ecologically, the pressures that you endure, the kinds of environments that you live in are unknown to you, are unknown to your genetics. And so there's a chance that although you get this boom of short-term productivity from indirect fitness benefits, in the long run, being too inbred, being too related within a society can spell your demise. And this is called an evolutionary trap, whereby there is a short-term benefit of a strategy and a possible long-term cost or long-term risk. And so very high levels of relatedness and inbreeding within a society can enhance indirect genetic benefits and reduce conflict. Hooray, right? That's good. We want that inside of a society. But if everyone's got the same genotype, you're all brother, sister, cousins, like guess what happens when the world outside changes? There's a chance that one day you're going to get snake eyes and roll snake eyes, and you're not going to have ecological settings that your genotype can endure. So the problem is evolution can't see the future, right? It doesn't know what's going to happen in 1,000 generations. The thing that helps an individual enhance its inclusive fitness benefits today above its rivals is going to spread. Even though in 100 generations, 1,000 generations, it might be costly. Evolution can't see that in that moment. However, long-term processes like collapse of populations, collapse of species, collapse of whole communities, hypothetically, all the diversity that we see today is a trade-off or represents rather both forces: quick selection and long-term lineage, quick individual selection and long-term lineage selection. The idea that whole lineages can have traits like level of inbreeding that will determine whether or not that lineage through evolutionary time proliferates, like ants or flowering plants, or just doesn't, like coelacanths at the bottom of the ocean. You're probably like, what the hell is a coelacanth? Well, it's basically a weird fish that lives in the bottom of the ocean, the deep, deep ocean, that has lobed fins, and we thought it was extinct for a long time, and then we were shocked that there was one species that was still around millions of years later, and now I think that there are 2 species that we think are still around. But anyway, they're not evolutionary winners. The reason you haven't heard of them is because they're not all that successful from either a persistence or a speciation angle. So evolution can't see the future, is always discounting the future. Immediate payoffs are what's spread, but long-term costs are still important for trimming off the little branches of the tree of life. They're thinned by species and lineage level processes. All right, division of labor. Sounds like exactly like what it is. So division of labor is just the idea that different individuals inside of a society will specialize on only a subset of the tasks that, and a complementary subset of the tasks that it takes for the society to function. So in human society, this happens all the time. Some of us become welders, and some of us become repairmen, and some of us become business people, and some of them become carpenters or whatever. I don't do any of these things. I'm neither handy nor domestic. So I mean, in life, there are a million different niches that make the human society propel forward. And because each of those tasks requires quite a lot of learning and time spent to master it, it's no surprise that inside of human societies, different individuals take on different tasks, they specialize them over the course of their lifetime, and it takes a milieu of individuals with different specializations to make the world propel forward, to accomplish everything that a human society needs to accomplish. The same is true in social insect societies, right? So there are reproductives that put out eggs, and workers that attend to non-reproductive tasks. So there already, just between queens and workers, there's already a division of labor that there's one kind of individual that's specialized in reproduction and very little else, and then lots of other individuals that attend to different other tasks. And among those workers, not every single worker is doing the exact same thing. Some of those workers are going to be soldiers, and some of them are going to attend to brood primarily, and some of them are going to go off and forage primarily, and some of them in ant societies are going to excavate, and in other societies, and other individuals might add to the comb, right? So even though workers might all look identical, it doesn't mean that they have the same little insect occupations in life. And although, there's some fuzziness, individuals do switch tasks a little bit, if you look over the long term, there's an undeniable signature that individuals tend to specialize on certain tasks for at least big chunks of their lives inside of social insect societies. And it's hypothesized that in social insects, the reason that they're so successful ecologically and evolutionarily in terms of producing many species and persisting through evolutionary time and reaching huge biomasses in terrestrial environments is because of this enhanced division of labor. This could be the thing that caused them and their populations to soar and to dominate the globe. So division of labor makes good sense too, right? So like if there's an optimal morphology or an optimal personality or an optimal physiology that enables you to be the best at one task, that optimal combination of behavior, morphology, and physiology that help you be great at this task, we'll say rearing offspring, might actually be not what's best for defending the colony, or for adding comb to the colony, or for excavating, or for laying eggs, right? So the problem for a solitary organism is like, well, what the hell do? You have all these things you need to accomplish, and there's just one you, right? You can't just change your morphology, physiology, and behavior instantaneously based on the task at hand. It's impossible. Societies, whole societies, they don't have to deal with trade-offs like that because they're not in it alone, right? I don't have to be the best at everything. I just have to be pretty good at one thing, and provided there are other individuals around that are pretty good or are optimized for other tasks, then in aggregate, we should do better because singleton individuals or generalists have to compromise the trade-offs of doing well at one task but worse at another based on their traits. As a society, we don't have to do that. We can all specialize in different tasks that we have high aptitudes for or that we've learned to accomplish more efficiently, and the whole society should work more effectively because of this. Stands to reason, totally intuitive. It's certainly associated with the rise of human societies, and so maybe it's associated with the rise of our co-winners in evolution, the social insects. The idea then is to match workers to their appropriate tasks based on their aptitudes, which either they are born with instinctually or morphologically or physiologically, or that they learn to be more efficient at that task through their experiences in life. In humans, it's primarily the latter, but probably some of the former. In social insects, it's probably a lot of the former and a lot of the latter. It's probably 50-50, instincts and learning that cause individuals to become really good at what they're doing. So, and of course, most common divide is like queen versus worker. So like you're basically hypothesizing that these social insects are going to be born with a little instinctual guidance counselor inside of their genes that are going to tell individuals to take on certain tasks, and specifically the tasks they're best at, and not other tasks that they'd be crappy at. Right? Makes sense. Yeah, sure, of course. Why not? Why not have evolution as a guidance counselor? It would be so much simpler. Well, it works in human societies. If you just look at undifferentiated workers in an assembly line, what does a worker in an assembly line in an automobile plant, which are so common in Canada, I think it's your second most common export, are auto parts. Inside of that assembly line, each worker is doing a very small amount of the total work that it takes to produce a car. An electric Ford Edge, which I think actually does have a plant that's being overhauled in Oshawa? Or maybe it's in Oakville? I don't remember. It's one of those plants that's being overhauled for the electric Edge right now. Anyway, so, but no one worker is like, I'm going to make an Edge myself over the next 3 days. Like, no one does that. It would involve so many different kinds of technical tasks and precision that most individuals wouldn't be able to learn all the things that were necessary to just build this Edge if given a blueprint and lots of opportunity to practice. But in an assembly line, my thing is I put these 17 rivets on this thing. That's what I do. I'm in this conga line of other individuals that are each doing one very small part of the whole. But you know what? Because I attach those 17 rivets in these exact same spots 50 times a day for every day, 40 hours a week, for 5 years of my life. Guess what? I'm pretty good at putting those rivets on. Not only am I going to do it right, usually, at least much better than a novice would, but I'm going to do it fast. Yeah, no surprise, by having each worker in a line focus on a specific element of the task that are required to produce this car, the whole aggregate is much more efficient. We spew out cars. Right. The analog would be in a colony spewing out daughter queens, and thus daughter societies, and drones, and growing the colony quickly. Much like building a car, building a successful society, defending it, and maintaining its hygiene requires a lot of work and a lot of specialized tasks that, just like roles in an assembly line, have their efficiency improved the longer that workers remain in that task and specializing on it. Stands to reason, and it's true. All right, so it also reduces it enhances the efficiency at that task, makes individuals less prone to errors, speeds up the rate that they perform that task, and it reduces things like learning costs or time costs from switching tasks. Just me waddling around the assembly line of this Ford Edge from spot to spot to make sure that I was doing each and everything in this conga line of tasks that need to produce the car would enhance the cost, right? I have to move between these tasks, and just moving to different spots inside of a factory with my car parts to assemble this car takes up a lot of time. It'd be inefficient. Even if I knew everything I was supposed to do in between each of those stops, just moving would take up my time, reduce the overall efficiency of how my time is spent in this overall process. Not only that, but presumably at some point, I had to learn how to do all these things. Even if I had an instinct, a set of genes that told me what I should do, I'm probably going to screw it up a lot, right? I'm probably going to mess it up a lot before I get good at it. And just because of the constraints of my brain, I probably cannot be maximally awesome at all of these things. So I spent all this time learning these things. I'm still not as good at each of them that a specialist would be. And I've got all this time switching between tasks, moving around the colony, or in this case, the metaphorical colony of an assembly line, that just is a waste of everyone's time. The aggregative process of producing these vehicles, of producing daughter societies, are compromised. Consistent with all these verbal arguments, there are some kinds of social insects, like these leafcutter ants on the right-hand side here in the Neotropics, Central and South America, that there are like 14 different castes, 8 different castes, 16 different castes. We can't really, it's hard to tell how many different castes there really are, but there's clear differences between these miners, these majors, these soldiers, and reproductives that enable them to do their job better. If you look at this little teeny tiny thing right over here in the top left, guess what? It's probably not as good at defending the colony than this clunker here. There's these giant mandibles that could eviscerate 50 of these little things, right? So it stands to reason that there would be differences in the aptitude of these different kinds of castes for different kinds of jobs inside of the society, and that they should do the job that they're best at. Great hypothesis. Neat things about these about division of labor is that it doesn't really have to evolve, right? If you just take a bunch of social insects that are not all that social, we'll say a bunch of queens that normally form colonies independently, and you just force them into a glass container and lab and just don't let them get away from each other, guess what happens? Some of those queens begin to specialize at excavating a nest. Others begin to specialize at foraging. Others begin to specialize in reproduction. Even though these queens have never evolved in a context where they had to co-found a society, by forcing them together, division of labor emerges spontaneously, which means that division of labor, task specialization, different individuals attending to one task and doing it over and over and over, isn't necessarily something that has to evolve. It's something that's there de novo to begin with. So as soon as there are groups of animals and a variety of tasks that need to be accomplished, some individuals just spontaneously begin to specialize in some tasks over others. Why might that be? Well, one of the things is searching for work. Searching for work, which is depicted in the bottom panel here, is that you basically, in social insect societies, this is broadly true, and this is true in some kinds of human societies, individuals just do the tasks that's around them, right? So like when a little tiny ant is born, it's not born on the surface of the dirt outside the colony, is it? It's born in a little nest chamber, way, way down in the bottom of the colony. So what do you think is the first job it ever does? Well, it doesn't drag its little abdomen out of the colony for hours, bumbling its way out and start foraging instantaneously. As soon as it's born, it starts to have someone vomit it into its mouth and then turn around and vomit into the mouth of the queen. Or someone vomits into its mouth. This is called trophallaxis, when one ant vomits digested juices, like basically like food from one mouth into the other. So those little conga lines of vomit that spread resources around the colony that make sure that all of the brood, the queen, and the workers are fed. Anyway, it's like little conga lines of vomit. Anyway, so someone vomits into its mouth, and then it vomits that into brood into their mouths to help them develop. Or it begins to just groom the brood around it. And you know what? That makes sense because not too long ago, it was a brood item, which means when it pupates, when it ecloses, oh my God, it's a giant sports car outside. Every single one of my neighbors who live in an economically depressed area of Tampa Bay, which is why I'm wearing a tank top all the time, one of them drives a Porsche, one of them has a Maserati, one of them has a Lexus, and they're all new. They're all new cars. Very impressive. Anyway, so when you're born inside the bottom of the society, you turn around and then there's the first work that's available to you. So you begin to do those tasks. And guess what? As long as those tasks need to be done, you tend to stay in that area and keep doing those tasks. And that will make you specialize on that task. Older individuals that begin to, like, just by chance alone, wander out of the brood chamber will oftentimes begin to be excavators, or will clean up portions of the colony that have collapsed in on themselves, because that's the work that's immediately around them. And as they get older, they can bumble around inside the society, and some of them get closer to the surface, and they become new foragers, right? They don't suddenly switch from being foragers to tending to brood way down in the bottom of the colony, because for a single worker to find the bottom of the colony or the surface, even if they knew where they were going in their little ant brains, could take them hours, days, and that would all that transport time would be time where they weren't accomplishing something important. Some of the work that needs to be done to make this society functional, do their jobs. So like searching for work is the idea that you just generally do the work that's around you. And because different portions of the colony have different kinds of jobs that need to be done, individuals are going to specialize, right? This nest is complex in structure, individuals tend to do the work that's around them, and that in turn could yield to spontaneous division of labor because individuals aren't teleporting around the colony. Another model, and these aren't independent models, these are all things that can be happening simultaneously. All right, so the threshold model. The threshold model is the idea that each little worker inside of a society, and indeed you and I in our societies, have thresholds to perform various kinds of tasks. Some of us require a lot of some stimulus to do a job. And some of us don't take almost any stimulus at all. And we're like, I'm going to start doing this job. My threshold is breached. I'm not putting any more of this crap. I'm going to start doing this job. And whoever has the lower threshold is going to do the job. And they're going to be the specialist. And whoever has the highest threshold, they're not going to do the job. All right, so here's a metaphor. Pretend that you and I become derelict. You drop out of school, and I decide that I'm going to go become a Pokemon Go world champion. I think that's probably already taken, but I'm going to pretend like I'm now going to become a paragon of Pokemon Go. And I've decided to leave my job and that this was my actual calling all along. I'm going to do it. I've got a bunch of battery packs. I'm going and doing it. Problem is, being a Pokemon Go paragon is not very lucrative for me. And so I'm going to need to live in a domicile with somebody else. And you decided to drop out of school because you wanted to go find yourself and you're independently wealthy and you have a trust fund. So you get into a sensible apartment, you need a roommate, you think that I should be a reasonable roommate because I have like a PhD and I seem like I'm not totally insane. And so you decide to room with me. And so we begin to cohabitate. You're in one room, I'm in another, but there's a shared domicile space in the center that'll be a living area and a kitchen. We both eat our food and blah, 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 blah. We both seem to purchase our groceries on our own. And you know, invariably, the dishes will begin to pile up in the sink, right? They just need to be rinsed off and then put in the dishwasher. The dishwasher needs to be emptied somewhat regularly, but who's gonna do that? Reality is it's not gonna be split as a task, even Steven. Even if you start leaving me passive-aggressive stickers all over the house, like, Jonathan, it's Tuesday, you got to do your cleaning today, stop it. I like how there's also an ashtray in here. I just noticed that. My roommate likes to smoke, so like, this is not outside the realm of possibilities. So anyway, so you and I probably have differences, though, in the level of filth that we're willing to endure. In real life, I actually have a really low threshold for filth, and so I start cleaning spontaneously very quickly, and I become the cleaning specialist in the house because I don't like to have crap everywhere. But in this story, in this parable, let's pretend that I'm the one that can live in rancid filth and never seem to really even realize it, right? I'm laying on my chaise in my living room, eating incessantly, wheezing for breath while I chain smoke, play Pokemon Go, and pile up refuse all around me. I then wander over to bed, wonder why I don't sleep so well because I did nothing all day, and then wander back over to my chaise, lay down in my rancid pile, and continue to accumulate detritus all around me. All right, but I don't see any of that filth. My threshold to clean is enormously high. I could be backstroking through filth, never gonna clean anything. And you, even though you are reasonably tolerant of filth, there's a moment in time when you open the fridge and everything is just overwrought with sporulating fungus. Everything is, all the fruit that I bought is melting, and there's just crap all over my chaise lounge. You're like, you just start cleaning. You're like, I can't handle this any longer. The passive-aggressive fight is over. I cannot get Jonathan to clean. You're gonna lose your mind. Me, totally unfazed. Can't even see the filth. You are on the breach of a major psychological breakdown if somebody did not start cleaning, and that turns out that that's going to be you after all. And guess what? Because you start cleaning, you're going to clean the room down to a clean enough level where you psychologically can handle it. Because my threshold for filth is enormous, very, very high, I never even noticed that it was dirty or clean. I was like, oh, this totally doesn't even faze me mentally. And that's where thresholds really cause specialization, because for some kinds of individuals, they're just insensitive to certain stimuli. They're just not observant towards certain kinds of tasks. And so it takes a huge amount of time for them to begin to, and a very severe set of circumstances, for them to start to have their threshold be breached and start engaging in that kind of work. You have a lower threshold to clean than I do. So you're always going to keep that stimulus of rancid stuff all around me below a threshold where I'll ever be cued to clean. So in our little dyadic interaction, you are the cleaning specialist. Presumably, in a social insect colony, I, as a worker, should have some threshold that is lower than yours in some task, and that will be the task that I specialize in. And if you look at individual workers when they're born inside of social insect societies, yes, some individuals have higher and lower thresholds for various kinds of tasks than others. Is there evidence that those are the individuals that eventually perform those tasks? No, very little evidence, but at least stands to reason that differences in thresholds to perform tasks could cause individuals to specialize in some tasks and not others in a complementary fashion. I'm never washing those dishes. Too bad for you. Bad news bears. Temporal polytheism is the idea that different ages of workers perform different kinds of tasks. That searching for work model that I described before on the bottom here, young workers tend to be in the bottom of the colony, so they're going to do the tasks that are immediately around them in the bottom of the colony. Older workers, the ones that reach the top, are invariably older individuals, sometimes much older individuals, and those individuals that forage. So temporal polytheism is best known in honeybee societies, but it's common in lots of other social insect societies, and that's that the kind of tasks that you do change with your age. Temporal, time, poly, many, ethos, behaviors. Your behaviors are changing across your development, and in this specific case, your tasks that you're performing are changing over the course of your development. So after honeybees first emerge, they're oftentimes cleaning the comb and feeding larvae because they were just a larva themselves. They just came out of one of these caps. They're going to turn around and start caring for larvae around them that haven't yet hatched or closed. Then they spend a big chunk of time receiving food from incoming foragers and building comb, which are tasks that are not immediately around the brood, but are sort of peripheral on the comb of the colony. And then later on in life, they either take on things like corpse taking or guarding the hive, which are tasks that bring them to the entrance to the hive, but don't have them leaving at least very far, just dropping off dead bodies of former co-workers inside the society, or guarding the hive and seeing if they see any visual stimuli like looming towards the colony, like, I don't know, a beekeeper or a child or a dog or whatever, or a bear that's trying to break into the colony. I don't know why it was all murdering people to begin with, but lots of things can attack beehives. And so we wait for those to show up and we try to defend the colony. And then it's only late in life that they become external foragers, where we actually start leaving the colony to go get pollen or nectar or water and bringing it back to the society regularly. So which tasks individuals are doing change over the course of their lives. This is called the temporal polytheism. All of these things are known to structure division of labor, i.e. how work is distributed across the different members of the society, and then individuals specialize in different kinds of tasks. The tasks that are around them, the tasks that are characteristic of their age, or the tasks that align with their low thresholds to perform those particular kinds of tasks relative to recalcitrant other individuals that are not attended to that kind of task. All right, so we're gonna end on, I guess, on this slide today. I guess maybe I'm gonna spend a week and a half on social insects, which means I'm gonna cram in reptiles and amphibians next, and then I will try to do fish. If anything gets cut off, it's gonna be cut. I'm gonna cut off mammals, and we'll cover birds, because like you guys are mammals yourselves, and you probably know a little bit about how mammals work. But if I'm gonna cut off anything, it's gonna be primates and humans, and then we're gonna winnow our way down from that based on what's available left in this course, time available that's left in this course. I may be able to make a few other lectures later on after the course is over. I won't make you guys take exams on them. You won't have to write any, what do you guys call it? Writing an exam? Yeah, writing, I won't make you write an exam. It's not a term I'm used to. Writing it, I won't make you write an exam on it, but I will still post videos on that topic just in case you're just inquisitive, because I do want you to have that content. I think it's neat, and it will be fun for me to make those lectures anyhow. I actually do enjoy teaching, so I hope that's clear, but it is. It's true whether or not it's clear. Anyway, optimal caste ratio. The idea is that if different castes perform different kinds of tasks for the society, and they perform the tasks that they're best at, then there should be an optimal ratio of different kinds of castes, either queens to workers, majors, i.e. big workers, to minors, small workers, or even finer differentiation than that, different like soldiers versus majors versus minors versus minima, which are like the teeny tiniest individuals, and that the optimal ratio of the different types of castes might vary based on the colony's age or what season it is or what environment it's in. And so colonies should evolve to maintain those optimal ratios, and that they should change dynamically through the season based on the challenges that a society endures. So this was a notion developed by E.O. Wilson and George Oster about 40 years ago or so, 45 years ago, 1976. Yeah, maybe it's longer than that. Maybe it's 44 years ago or so. Anyway, so the first prediction is that the optimal ratio should vary by environment and season. So we should see patterns like in the summer versus the winter of characteristic differences in the caste ratios. Maybe there should be more soldiers in the summer because there's more competition and threats, and more miners in the winter because they're cheaper to create and they are better for within colony tasks. Sure, maybe. Or maybe in a high predator versus a low predator environment, there should be characteristic differences in the ratio of different kinds of workers that are associated with environments that have different kinds of selection pressures. So there could be among site and not temporal variation within sites in these ratios that matches the challenges that colonies have to endure. Possible. And then the other prediction is that if you perturb these ratios, if you mess them up in some way, that it should negatively impact the performance of the colony as a whole, right? Because if there's an optimal ratio and they've evolved to attain it, then when you meddle with that, that should reduce their performance. Great, makes total sense, right? You know, like I said, well-oiled clock, we're gonna have these different ratios and they're gonna vary based on time of year and blah, 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 and they're spewing out new workers all the time, and we know that what kinds of worker an individual becomes can vary based on their development, and that can be finely tuned. Yeah, it just makes good sense, right? Well, it turns out that none of that's probably true. At least it's not happening all the time. So it's a nice idea. You know, lots of people spend, hundreds and hundreds of citations on this topic, thousands of papers on this topic, and it just turns out none of that's true, probably. So neither prediction number one nor prediction number two seems to bear out. So prediction number one, that there's going to be characteristic ratios of different kinds of soldiers and miners or queens versus workers in various environments. Nope, doesn't work out. Not across environmental gradients or specific contrast, at least not very often. That there will be differences in the ratios according to season. That's not true either. And that there should perturbations to those ratios, adding some and removing others versus, various kinds of controls, that those should cause characteristic shifts in the colony's overall performance. Nope, no support for that either. So it's a bunch of nice ideas, but that doesn't seem to work out. And then, of course, there's a dark alternative view of insect societies, not as like highly rigid machines, where different kinds of castes perform different kinds of tasks, and that those are relatively fixed associations, and that colonies should have evolved to know what they need in different kinds of environments and times of years. There's another idea that colonies don't really know what they're going to need until they need it. And so rather than having a relatively rigid division of labor, where individuals do the tasks they're best at, we know how many individuals of various kinds of aptitudes we need, that we're going to need a more flexible kind of organization that allows us to meet the challenges that will fluctuate day to day or moment to moment, and that will require that workers switch what they do based on what the colony needs, and that the colony will adaptively know how to shunt individuals to different kinds of tasks collectively to accomplish that dynamic set of challenges, the moving target that's going to change from day to day, day to night, from morning to afternoon, and certainly from season to season and year to year. So the idea that we could just have like a well-oiled machine that does exactly what to do, and we all have the right instincts, and that we're just going to create those optimal ratios, totally wrong, not at least mostly wrong. And we'll talk about what the alternative to that is and why that appears to be bear out more successfully in the data in just a moment. And then the person who fought a long time, probably several decades, to try to make this alternative hypothesis that was the right one in the end, or at least better supported, pierce the literature, was a woman named Deborah Gordon, who we'll talk about next week? No, tomorrow. I'm going to have another lecture tomorrow. Hopefully I'll finish the theoretical stuff on social insects tomorrow. I'll have less theory and more natural history on the other taxa because there's less theory to talk about. Anyway, take it easy. Have a good one. Bye.